Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 4:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Jenny Beth Martin from Tea Party Patriots will talk the Department of Government Efficiency. Jonathan Fahey is here at 5 o'clock, former ICE director. We'll talk to him about a really important trial today, Laken Riley's killer in court. And then Dr. Marty McCary is here at 5:30 to talk about the hysterical reaction to RFK trying to make America healthy again. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Fairfax County Schools is attempting to force teachers to lie to their students. That's the latest. There's a headline today out of ABC7 WJLA, Nick Minnock, of course. Fairfax teacher seeks accommodation to not refer to students by their preferred pronouns. In other words, to not lie to them. On behalf of a Fairfax County Public Schools teacher, America First Legal and the Founding Freedoms Law Center sent a letter to Fairfax County Public Schools Superintendent Michelle Reed and school administrators on Thursday, asking them to not force a Union Mill elementary school teacher to use students' preferred gender pronouns. The teacher has been working at Fairfax County Public Schools for 15 years. Quote, at the beginning of this year, for the first time that she can recall as a part of her teacher training, she was required to confirm that she would affirm a student's gender identity and chosen pronouns as a part of accepting the Fairfax County Public Schools regulations on gender and speech, the letter to Fairfax County Public Schools stated. Oh, so a Soviet struggle session for a teacher who just wants to tell the truth. Joining us now is Ian Pryor. He's a senior advisor at America First Legal, and he's on the phone. Hello, Ian. Good to have you with us.
Hey, Vince. How's it going?
It's going well. So here you have a teacher who, as I understand it, is raising a religious objection to this compelled speech and saying there are two sexes, and I'm not going to lie to my students. What am I missing?
You're not missing anything, but I think what Fairfax County Public Schools is missing and what several public school districts in Northern Virginia are missing is a Supreme Court decision that came down from the Virginia Supreme Court about 11 months ago called Vlaming versus West Point School Board. And what you had in that situation was a teacher who, similar to our client, objected to being required to referring to a student by their chosen pronouns. And the school said, well, you have to. And he said, I can't do that. And they fired him. Well, they lost that case, the school board did, at the Virginia Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said here in Virginia, religious rights are so important that they even go beyond that of the First Amendment. So when somebody requests an accommodation based on their free exercise rights, it has to be granted unless it is a severe threat to public safety and order. And even when you have that, when you don't grant it, you have to show that, look, we didn't grant it. This was the most minimally restrictive way that we could actually deal with this. Well, just like in Vlaming, this is the exact same kind of case. And it's really amazing that Fairfax County Public Schools didn't grant her this accommodation, given clear precedent from the Virginia Supreme Court from 11 months ago. But that's the state of these schools. I mean, they seemingly want to embrace litigation before they do the right and legally required thing.
Well, it's lawless is what it is. These schools are giving a middle finger to the Supreme Court of Virginia and, of course, by extension, the people of Virginia, and saying we're going to do whatever we want, or we're going to compel teachers to speak the way we want them to speak on issues that, as you point out, involve breaking their religious convictions. And it's sad that we even have to get to the point where we have to mount a religious defense of being normal people and saying, this is a boy, this is a girl, I'm not playing these stupid games, I'm here to educate the kids. And the other piece here that I'm wondering about, Ian, is there even a student who's involved here, or is this merely they said, hey, if this ever comes up, we need you to lie to the student?
Yeah, no, this is a blanket policy that requires you need to fill out this teacher training. And you need to affirm the fact that you accept all of these policies and that you are going to follow these policies at any point in the future. And, of course, if you don't follow those policies as a teacher, you could be faced with disciplinary consequences. And so merely by saying that I accept that, mean, you are lying to yourself. You are compromising your free exercise rights, and you are being compelled to speak in a way that you do not agree with, which is unconstitutional.
And this teacher's been there for 15 years, which means she's a teacher in good standing. She probably has plenty of students who love her, and she's been effective in that role. And here they are trying to force her to do something that violates her conscience. I wonder what the downside is for these school systems, though, because you're right about the West Point School Board and Peter Vlaming, who we've had on this program multiple times, the former high school French teacher. They tried to compel him to say things that weren't true and violated his conscience, and it goes to the Supreme Court. And the West Point School Board ended up having to pay over $500,000 in damages and attorney's fees as a result of that Supreme Court decision. But that, in the end, Ian, quite unfortunately, it only hurts the taxpayer. So it's almost like these school boards, they don't even care that they're violating the law because they know they can stick taxpayers with the bill.
Well, that's right, but things might change in about, 2 months or so, because, you've heard from the incoming administration that schools that continue these indoctrination programs are now risking federal funding. And so, what you've had before is, let's take the Title IX context, which I know, involves students, but they'll say, well, we have to do this because of Title IX, and they'll cite, the Biden administration's Title IX rules. Well, there's a couple of problems with that excuse. Number one, Title IX is a spending clause act, which means you take the money and then you have to follow the policy. If you don't take the money, you don't have to follow the policy. So if these schools want to choose their interpretation of Title IX and this permissive grant of money over the Virginia Constitution, well, that's their problem. But even more interesting is that those Title IX rules by the Biden administration were stayed in multiple states, including Virginia, and that injunction got appealed to the Supreme Court. And all 9 justices of the Supreme Court said, this interpretation of Title IX, where sex includes gender identity, is most likely unlawful. As it relates to the First Amendment, as it relates to equal protection, as it relates to, ultra vires doctrine, et cetera.
Yes.
So they really can't fall back on this stuff anymore. And now they have to deal with the fact that they're going to be, understanding a new administration coming in that's going to look at these things very differently. So they're the ones that ultimately are going to, these school systems are going to risk their funding. So,
but doesn't this also violate, and you may have mentioned it, so forgive me if I didn't hear that, but doesn't this violate the Civil Rights Act as well? I thought you were entitled to religious protections in your job from this type of harassment and these types of forcing people to do jobs that violate their religious convictions.
That's right. Yeah, it's also a Title VII issue. So at the federal level, you've got Title VII, where employees can bring their employers to court. They would have to go through the EEOC process and then to federal court. But here at the state level too, the Human Rights Act interprets their provisions similar to Title VII. But in this case, really, you don't even have to go to statutory language because it's right there, the Constitution, the Virginia Constitution, the most powerful thing that we have.
Yes.
And again, it continues to frustrate and confuse that these bureaucrats who, cannot and will not just follow the law as it's been handed down by courts, and not just the Virginia Supreme Court. We remember Tanner Cross in Loudoun County.
Yes.
They tried to do the same thing to him. The LCPS, they lost that case. They appealed it to the Supreme Court. They lost that case there. I mean, how many times do these school systems have to get smacked down in court before they follow the law?
This is why I'm hoping that with the people that President Trump is putting in the United States Department of Justice, that they can overhaul the Civil Rights Division. Because if they can get people in there in the Civil Rights Division who can fight for Americans and actually protect their civil rights, they can come flying in when they see these brazen violations taking place.
I 100% agree with you on that. I think the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice, it needs to be overhauled. I mean, they're still dealing, or they're still talking about things that were, maybe a civil rights issue 50, 40 years ago. But right now, what we're seeing is the biggest threat to civil rights is going after people's First Amendment rights, right? Everything is misinformation, even if it's not. So we're going to censor you. We're going to force you to say what the government wants you to say. And we've been seeing that for the past, 8, 10 years. That is the biggest civil rights crisis of our time. And seeing a Department of Justice that takes that seriously will be a big step forward to solving the problem.
I'm so grateful every time your organization gets involved in an issue like this, America First Legal. Does this rattle their cage? Does Fairfax County Schools, do they care that you're getting involved, or do they just laugh it off?
Well, I mean, they should care, because we also have another litigation with them involving students and the exact same policy. And in that case, in Fairfax County Circuit Court, the court ruled that, yes, this is facially unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional as applied. So, I don't know how many more times Fairfax County Public Schools has to be brought into court, but we're going to keep doing it as long as it's necessary. And
what are the ways to remedy this? I mean, how does this, the conclusion, is it amount to a fine? Is that usually how this ends? They have to pay some big sum of money to the teacher?
Well, it could be money. It could be a court order. And that's probably the most important remedy, where, if this was something that ended up in litigation and you get an injunction from the court, or you get declaratory relief from the court saying that this policy is facially unconstitutional and it's unconstitutional as applied, you need to stop enforcing that policy. So a court order is really something that will pretty much end this.
Okay. And so where the teacher stands now is, obviously she's joined in a lawsuit. You're filing a lawsuit on her behalf.
Well, not yet. I'm sorry.
So
she requested an accommodation and she was denied. And so we took it to the next step, and we sent a letter saying, let us know by next week if you're going to grant this accommodation. If not, we will take further action.
Got it.
So they have some time to follow the law here, and we'll see what they do.
Got it. We're at the sternly worded letter phase. I got it. I understand. All right. Well, good. Keep us abreast of everything that's happening there. We're rooting for the teacher. I don't even know who she is, but I'm on her side. I know that much. Ian Pryor, thank you very much with America First Legal. Good to talk to you, sir.
You too, Vince. Thanks.
That's Ian Pryor, of course. And how about that? So once again, in summary, a teacher working for Fairfax County Schools for 15 years never has received training telling her that if a student approaches you and says, you have to lie to me about my gender, you have to do it. The school system says, you've got to do it. These are our gender and speech codes. That's the requirement. You've got to lie to the student. And the teacher says, wait a second, I believe that God created man and woman. I have a religious conviction here that you're violating. I need an exception here, an exception. They say, no, you will violate your religious conscience if you want to keep working here. You have to. It's more important. Fairfax County Schools is more important than God. Oh, what a bunch of terrible people. They're pulling out all the stops to try and to crush Pete Hegseth right now, President Trump's nominee to be the head of the Department of Defense. There's an article up today in CBS with the headline, Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick for defense secretary, was investigated for alleged sexual assault in 2017. What they failed to tell you in that headline is that there was not enough evidence at all to go after Hegseth for this. So they're kicking up dirt. This is the Brett Kavanaugh approach. We're going to try and smear him as much as possible to try and stop him from becoming a Secretary of Defense. Cops looked into this. They didn't find evidence to substantiate charges against him. They didn't charge him with anything. So that's disgraceful. Also, an AP headline just out in the last half hour, Trump Pentagon pick had been flagged by fellow service member as possible insider threat. This is the same stuff. First of all, Pete Hegseth wrote an entire book where he talked about this. In fact, here he is talking to the Sean Ryan show a week ago about this very thing. AP is acting like it's breaking news.
I was deemed an extremist because of a tattoo by my National Guard unit in Washington, D.C. And my orders were revoked to guard the Biden inauguration. Jerusalem cross tattoo, which is just a Christian symbol.
Is that
this is the one.
Is that the tattoo?
Yep, right here. This one is what got me disinvited. I'd never had orders revoked before. I mean, listen, it's a standard deal. You remember after January 6th, everyone was in Washington, D.C. Like Nancy Pelosi had the parking garages full of National Guardsmen. My commander called me a day before. more tepidly and was like, Major, you can just stand down. We don't need you. We're good. I'm like, what do you mean? Everybody's there. He's like, no, he couldn't tell me. When I was writing the book, I reached out to somebody in the unit who could confirm with 99.9% certainty because he was in the meetings and on the emails. Nope, someone inside the DC Guard trolled your social media, found a tattoo, used it as an excuse to call you a white nationalist, an extremist, and you were specifically by name orders revoked to guard the inauguration because you were considered a potential threat.
How is that? It's a cross.
It's a cross. It's a Jerusalem cross, which is, as I understand, a pretty normal tattoo. A lot of people have. I saw people across social media sharing their Jerusalem cross tattoos. Like, yeah, a lot of people have. He has one. He's an extremist in the eyes of the Biden-Harris administration, in the eyes of the left. Isn't that kind of the theme of this hour? You have a teacher who says she's not going to call a boy a girl or vice versa. She has religious convictions. She's a Christian, you see. And what does Fairfax County say? You're an extremist. You will abide by our compelled speech. You will lie to that student on our orders. And here Pete Hegseth, an American patriot, a veteran, he's being slandered by his own government as an extremist for being a God-fearing Christian. We've got a real battle on our hands. It's not just political, it's spiritual too. And Pete Hegseth has been on the receiving end of it. So many have. You got to wake up to this. Coming up, Jenny Beth Martin from Tea Party Patriots joins us. We'll talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. What can Elon and Vivek do to make that government even a little more efficient? Hey there, good afternoon to you. It's now 4:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll be joined by Jonathan Fahey, former ICE director, former federal prosecutor. There's a big court hearing today in the death of Laken Riley, that trial underway. And Dr. Marty McCary is here at 5:30, the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine professor, Bloomberg School of Public Health. We're going to talk to him about RFK Jr. being tapped to be Trump's leader of the Department of Health and Human Services. The left is in an all-out panic over that. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. On the phone is Dan calling in from Reston right now on line one. Hello, Dan. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. The American people overwhelmingly voted for Trump to bring him in as a change agent, and now they're going to question the Republicans that were counting on them to support him are going to question his choices for nominations, right? And all this stuff. And there's nobody that he could nominate that the left would not have a problem with. They'd be getting their panties in a wad, no matter who it is, right? So
yes.
Any CEO loves disruptive opportunities. They look for that. Just look how, when BlackBerry had the market for years, and then suddenly the iPhone was introduced. It was very disruptive, and look at iPhone now, and look at BlackBerry now. So Trump is a smart guy, and he's looking to disrupt the market. We don't need another swampy person who's sold their soul to the military-industrial complex. In the case of Pete Hegseth as department, leading the Defense Department. So he's looking to disrupt things, and his nominations will certainly do that. But those swampy Republicans like John Thune, who's kind of a rhino, kind of weak, if they don't support Trump, then in 2 years the Democrats are going to have the perfect opportunity to say, see the Senate and the House and didn't do a damn thing.
Yes, you're totally right. You're totally right. And one other piece here is that the people that he's bringing in because he trusts them to execute the vision that he was elected on. And there are two, unfortunately, the universe of people who fit that description is far too small, unfortunately. It's not some massive universe of people who he trusts to execute in each of these agencies. So he's picking people who are bold choices, no question. But he's doing that because he has to have confidence that they're actually going to carry out the vision that he was elected on.
So what did the Democrats actually think RFK Jr. was going to do? When Trump talked about bringing him in, did they think he was just going to come in and, of course, he's replacing the guy that wants to be a woman and the guy that steals steals dresses at airport,
Yes.
Luggage carousels. And so there is nobody that the left is not going to pick apart and say that they're a lunatic on the
Exactly
view. So
right.
It is, if Trump's going to be successful, he's got to just plow ahead and just assume that the media is going to give him a hard time.
Stay the course. I totally agree. I think he's learned that lesson, which is why you're witnessing what you're witnessing right now. Dan, thank you very much. Excellent points. I want to bring in our guest right now because I want to talk about something else President Trump has done. He's established this Department of Government Efficiency, or at least that's what they're calling it. It may not be an official cabinet level department, but boy, could we use some of that. And to head it up, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Here to discuss that is Jenny Beth Martin. She's the founder of Tea Party Patriots. She's been trying to make the government more efficient for years. Jenny Beth, good to have you with us.
Oh, it's so good to be with you. And isn't it exciting that they want to make the government efficient? I'm excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things I love is as President Trump announces all of these nominees, whether it's Matt Gaetz at the Justice Department or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at HHS, you see all of these articles where they say that, federal employees might quit their jobs now. And I keep thinking, well, he's not even in office yet and he's winning.
That's right. He's already making the government smaller if they actually quit their jobs. I think that most people around the country would say, okay, and so what if you're quitting your job? Because most people around the country don't think that the government is doing what it needs to do to make the country great, to make the country function the way that it should, and to make their lives easier. And what I mean by that is they don't actually expect the government to do a whole lot for them. They just want the government to get out of their way so they can make a living and provide for their family and have an opportunity for a bright future.
Yes.
And the government's standing in the way of that.
So tell me what you think of this Department of Government Efficiency. We've seen some of the contours of it already developing. Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, no question, these are very bright guys. Elon Musk is very good at running massive organizations and optimizing for efficiency. They've indicated that they will be crowdsourcing ideas for things that can be cut and are interested in bringing on a good team who is obsessively focused with this mission. What do you make of it?
Well, I'm very glad that is what they are working to do. And I think that they are uniquely qualified to be able to go in and figure out, is this efficient? Does this work well? Is this a good use of money? One thing, Vince, that I have seen is I've interacted with members of Congress, whether it's congressmen or senators, and also their staff, is that as the budget and the deficit and the debt all get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there are more zeros after the first couple of numbers.
Yes.
The more zeros you have, the more paralyzed people in D.C. are by those numbers. They don't think the numbers are real, and they don't treat the numbers as if they're real. They're just like, oh, well, we can just add a few more zeros here or there, and it won't matter. It really does matter, and Elon Musk is able to look at numbers and money and understand that it's real, and the zeros don't intimidate him. And that's why I think he is uniquely qualified to be able to look at it from an efficiency and return on investment standpoint. There's so much waste. It's just horrible.
You talk to people inside of the federal government. I'm talking about just good public servants who are there because they actually believe in the mission, and they're frustrated by what they see. If you talk to government contractors, people who work, they get these big government contracts who really do want to focus on whatever product it is that they're part of. You got a lot of good Americans out there who have these jobs, but they describe the most insane possible system. Things like the coworkers who show up who barely do anything, who just sit all day and collect a paycheck, or they're tasked with projects that they could finish in weeks if they really set their minds to it, but they're told, hey, don't rush this thing because we have to wring every last dollar out of it, and it's going to take years to process. These are the types of things where the American people are being bilked, taken advantage of, and we could be saving so much more money, Jenny Beth.
Yes, we could. And when I was just speaking to someone last night whose husband, she and her husband work in the government, and she actually was in the first Trump administration. And she said that her husband worked in some other, he has a standard government job, I think, that hasn't gone, he's not an appointee. But when he tried to cut his budget and be more efficient and better and not spend all the money that was appropriated, then they say, okay, well, then you're not getting any more. And if you have a legitimate need for more the next year,
yes,
you can't even ask for more because you didn't spend it all. That is such a perverse incentive to spend all the money. It should be, here is the maximum that you can spend. If you come in less, that's great. Maybe we have to give some sort of a bonus because they didn't spend it all. If that's what it takes so they don't spend it all, we'd still be saving money. And then the next year, the budget should be based on what they actually need to accomplish what they're doing, not just the last year's numbers plus some.
One of the big things that keeps going up with each passing day that almost no one talks about, E.J. Antoni does, is that our budget, quickly, one of the biggest item on our budget is debt servicing the debt, just paying payments on the national debt. How big of a crisis are we in, Jenny Beth?
Well, I have said for years that we are in a massive, horrible crisis because if interest rates go up, it changes how much you have to pay each month on the debt. And it just becomes, it becomes a very dangerous situation, and we need to be able to get that under control. And that is something that Elon is talking about and understands. And I'm very inspired by what I'm hearing from Elon Musk, because he's talking about the things that the Tea Party movement have been talking about for the last 15 years, but we haven't had the kind of champion that he is with the gravitas that he brings because of the accomplishments he's had personally. But Vince, I'll tell you something that's very important we all need to be paying attention to. We live in a government where there are checks and balances, and laws have to be passed by Congress, and bills have to be passed by Congress and signed into law by the president.
Yes.
That means that if we want true, enduring, lasting change, which is what I want, it's got to be more than a change in regulations and more than executive orders. We need to be doing all we can to get Congress to take the speeches and the ideas that President Trump has, get those put into bills that are passed so we codify it, so another president in 4 or 8 years or 12 years can't just come in with the stroke of the pen and undo everything like we saw happen 4 years ago.
Jenny Beth, how critical are those first 100 days to that mission?
I think that they are extremely critical, partly because he will be doing a lot with executive order because that's how they're functioning right now. But then to get the lasting change, we need to be looking at what can be done with reconciliation. We need to be looking at what bills can be passed that the majority of Americans agree on, that maybe even Democrats in Congress would vote for because they want to get reelected, so they need to do what their constituents want, rather than just the sharp partisanship that the country obviously is tired of right now. And then it's going to be up to us. We cannot expect Trump to do it all by himself, or Trump and Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi and Elon and the others. We have to we're no longer going to be going to rallies because we're out of rally time. Now's the time to be picking up the phone, calling our congressmen, calling our senators, posting on social media about the things that need to be done, and to do so in a thoughtful manner so that we actually accomplish the goals that we voted for.
Yeah, for sure. And on the list of the most expensive things our government does are some really difficult ones to tackle. I mean, obviously, I mentioned interest payments, but you've got the Social Security Administration, upwards of $130 billion, and the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Education, Department of Defense. We're looking at just massive amounts of money going out the door each month, and figuring out how to get those under control, it's a big task.
It is a big task, and I think that at the end of the day, it's going to mean that in one way or another, it is affecting more than just federal government employees. It's affecting all Americans.
Yes.
And we're going to have to realize that if we want our country to succeed, and the majority of Americans just voted to make America great again, if we really want that to happen, we're going to have to be willing to put a little bit of skin in the game to right the ship and get us going back in the right direction. And I don't know how all of that plays out, because the things that you just were mentioning are tough areas, and they do cost a lot of money.
Yes.
But we can start with the low-hanging fruit, which is the waste, fraud, and abuse, and duplicative programs, and then see how much that takes care of, and then prioritize and go from there based on how we're going to get us to a point where we actually can get to a debt-free future.
Yeah, that's huge. And, of course, that takes also stimulating the economy, which President Trump is very focused on doing. All right. Well, Jenny Beth Martin with Tea Party Patriots, always nice to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Vince.
Of course. And, that number I just quoted, Social Security Administration being $129 billion, that's a month. That's a month. That's not even the full year. That's just per month. There's a lot of money going out of the government, and we need to be able to pay for it. Seems like a basic thing. All right, let's see here. I've got Richard calling in from Manassas now on line 3. Hello, Richard. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for taking my call. What Elon and Vivek are trying to do is definitely God's work. But you kind of touched on it. Medicare and Medicaid fraud is definitely an area where they can definitely get efficiency. I just found out today, someone I know, his mother-in-law, is has welfare or Medicare fraud going on in another state on another side of the country. Someone's scamming their, identity theft going. And, if that's just one person, you extrapolate that out to the number of elderly out there who have no idea that their identity is being stolen, and prescription drugs are being prescribed out in their name, and they don't even know it. How many billions of dollars, like you say, a month are going out the door in Medicare fraud?
Yes.
If they figure out a way to track who's who based on where they live and where the prescriptions are going out, because there's still doctors out there who are pill mills, like we saw with the Purdue Pharmaceutical. Yep. West Virginia, Ohio, J.D. Vance's, life stories built on it, or a big component of it. They get a handle on that. They could make a huge impact right out the gate.
On this point of Medicare and Medicaid fraud, there's an organization called the National Healthcare Anti-Fraud Association. They estimate that taxpayers are losing more than $100 billion per year to Medicare and Medicaid fraud, and they believe that that's a conservative estimate in terms of how much money is being lost to fraud. So, in other words, this is a ripe area, to your point, to target, Richard, because we're looking at a lot of money that's being straight up stolen from Americans each year. And if we can cut that, well, we're going to be well on our way towards, a lot more fiscal sanity than we have now.
Yeah, and and that's it. They call it entitlement. Oh, you can't touch it, third rail type stuff. But everybody wants to chip around the edges of the discretionary, like defense and whatnot spending. But the Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, that's really where the true debt that you just talked about, the interest and all that. It's those three programs right there account for like 66% of the entire budget. It's ridiculous.
All right. Well, yeah, it's such a good point. I love it. Thank you very much. Yeah, that man, imagine if they could tackle that. That'd be a big deal. They've got a lot of good work ahead of them. All right, coming up on the program, Jonathan Fahey's with us, the former ICE director. We'll talk about Laken Riley. She died due to a murder from an illegal alien. That trial starts today. And then Dr. Marty McCary is with us, all ahead on WMAL.